Welcome into the Yachts and Audibles podcast. Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack on this Monday edition. That means it's Mailbag Monday. We dive into questions that you guys have submitted to us. You send them to Erik using the hashtag Yachts and Audibles, or you could just tag him on Twitter or go on to, most importantly, the duckterritory.com website and check in on the message board either there or message him for your questions. Got a feeling it's going to be a wide range because we had a good, interesting game, and we've got an interesting matchup this weekend as well.
I'm going to open up the question submitting as well to YouTube comments because I've been seeing a couple people asking about it, and we haven't really used it. I'll try to monitor it, especially after, let's say, our predictions podcast. You can go back and drop it there. That's going to be the most recent one we usually put up each week. If you don't have Twitter or if it's difficult to find it there, put it on YouTube. Use the hashtag so I can kind of cycle through and find it. But I know there are people who watch the show on YouTube who've been asking about how to get questions on the show. So there's maybe another alternative route to go. All right. This is going to be a fun one. I think we've got some really cool topics to get into today. We're going to start looking forward, and then we're going to kind of go backwards. The first question from @TJ Norton16, hashtag Odds and Audibles. Arizona or Cal? Which game poses the biggest trap game threat, assuming the Ducks are undefeated in Pac-12 play for Cal as well? The Ducks do play California. The final, I believe it's the 22nd of October. No, it's the 29th of October, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the final
Halloween weekend.
It is the final game of October after they play UCLA at home. They will go to Berkeley. So that means to get to undefeated, they would have to beat Arizona. They would have to beat UCLA. I think UCLA is going to be a tough out, obviously, based upon what we saw this last weekend. I think this is an interesting question, and the reason I wanted to include it is because these are two programs that traditionally give Oregon some difficulty. The Cal's won a couple games that have been kind of tough. They've also just been really competitive and kind of weird low-scoring games for the most part of the decade. It seems like the Arizona games go one way or the other. It's like either Oregon wins by 5 touchdowns or they lose by 5 touchdowns historically. There haven't been that many close ones if you go back and look through it. But I also think what makes this interesting is stylistically, these teams are really different. And I think Arizona clearly poses a bigger threat when you look at what their strengths are. You look at Arizona offensively, this is a very potent passing offense. In fact, this is basically, aside from Washington, the most potent. And I think you look at Washington, you kind of wonder, you have some question marks after this last weekend, I think. Not that you don't with Arizona as well, but I think Washington kind of got tested and didn't maybe turn up the way you'd like to see from a Husky perspective. But Arizona, Jay Delore had 6 touchdowns this last weekend against Colorado. I know Colorado's obviously very poor. They fired
They're bad.
They made a coaching change directly after the game, which indicates they're not doing great. But, Arizona's second in the Pac-12 in pass offense. Where do we think Oregon has issues? It's in pass defense.
Mm-hmm.
Cal is 8th in pass offense, and I'll be honest, having watched a good amount of the Cal-Washington State game and even a little bit of the Cal game the week before, I don't think Plummer's he doesn't scare me. I think he can competently run an offense that, if they're able to succeed running the football, maybe they can beat you a little bit over the top with some play action stuff. But he doesn't concern me. Whereas Delora and Oregon's played him a couple times. He's someone that can be kind of scary to go against. And then you just look at what Cal does offensively. They have one of the best rush offenses in the conference behind Jaden Ott. And Washington, and Arizona is not a very good running team this year. So I think just from what offenses have had given Oregon problems, I think Arizona is probably scarier. And then it's interesting because you look at the defensive side of things. Cal, middle of the road rush defense. Arizona, very bad rush defense. So it kind of goes back and forth here a little bit of I think Oregon's defense is probably more susceptible to Arizona, but Oregon's offense should be able to move the ball really well against Arizona. And Arizona has a great pass defense, but that's because no one throws the ball in Arizona because they're busy running for 225 yards. So, I kind of go back and forth on this one. And an interesting thing is in the head-to-head, obviously Cal kind of handled Arizona, which is notable. But I actually think from a stylistic and kind of a matchup perspective, Arizona is probably a little bit scarier than Cal this year for me.
This is Arizona easily, 100%. this is just for how Oregon runs their defense. Arizona's probably like the last team that they want to see. They're heavy, they're screen heavy, they're quick break heavy. They got Jacob Cowan, who's an excellent receiver. They have a quarterback who's capable of throwing the ball anywhere over the field. And Oregon's one weakness defensively this year so far has clearly been running east to west on passes. Run defense is really good. I think they're second in the conference in stopping the run. But they can struggle at points in short, quick passes. We saw against Georgia, obviously. We saw that against Washington State just 2 weeks ago, a week ago, really. And that's going to be what Arizona does. That's their bread and butter. That's what they did last year, even though they just weren't good. They hit the transfer portal hard. They got some really good offensive players. I think Cal is just a very average Pac-12 team, and nothing about their offense really scares me. Like Erik was saying, I don't think Plummer is a quarterback who worries me. Jaden Ott, who's a very talented running back, he was really good against Arizona, but like I said, I think at the football game this weekend, that to Jared Denny of On Three, I felt like he and I could run for 100 yards each against Arizona's rush defense. Like, they're they're allowing over 200 yards a game on the ground, which is second to Colorado. Actually, I just looked this up. Colorado is averaging almost 300 yards on the ground, which is
that's unbelievable.
Really pitiful. Yeah, that's really impressive.
Unbelievable to see a defense allow 300 yards on the ground per game over a 5-game sample. Sorry, go ahead. I just was looking at that too.
It's impressive, but yeah, I just think Arizona is the bigger trap game. But like Erik said, you look at both of these teams, and they've had their own share of history, just like Washington State and Stanford have against Oregon in these types of scenarios. But I was talking about this yesterday, but this three game stretch between Washington State, Stanford, and Arizona are like all of Oregon's kryptonites, especially traveling to the desert. And so that kind of goes into why I think Arizona is even bigger of a trap game as well, just because they have to fly to the desert. And for some reason, that always kind of messes with Oregon. At least it has in the past. We'll see again this year. But just overall, why is it a trap game? Just what Arizona runs. It's just not conducive to what Oregon likes to do on defense.
Arizona, I guess. I don't think either of them are going to be a trap game, though. I don't. Jared said Colorado. I'm getting two teams mixed. California is an average Pac-12 team. Yeah, I agree with that. North Dakota State's an FCS team. They barely won that game. They were not competitive against Mississippi State. And then San Diego State's a team that traditionally puts up good defensive numbers, but they're not good this year either. And I'm choosing option C. Neither are a trap game. Oregon's going to blow out both teams.
Boom. Coming out of the gate. Firing. All right. Let's move on to number 2, at Canal Beers, which, by the way, great hash. I like that Twitter handle. Hashtag Odds and Audibles. Is it time to make Bucky Irving more of a bell cow back? He ran for over 9 yards per carry and seemed a few steps above the other backs. Curious, and he also, I don't even know if we want to get into this part because I feel like we've litigated this as much as we can. Curious about Cardwell status as well, assuming his injury kept him out. I don't even know if we want to touch on that because it's like he dresses and goes to practice. He warms up on the side. He does a little bit, but doesn't do very much. Dan says once he's healthy, he's going to be available to do things. Clearly, he's not healthy. His mom says he's healthy, though, and it's kind of this whole weird deal. So I don't want to open up that can of worms too much. I'm just putting that one off to the side. To the Bucky point, boy,
Erik, are you sure you want to talk about this?
My Bucky thing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I want to talk about this because I want to – if he just would have one more carry. This is like me watching Leonard Fournette last night on the Sunday Night Football game with my fantasy team of just like get him the ball a couple more times, and I'm going to be – I'm going to be golden. No, it's in the past now. My Skopil predictions feelings were a little bit hurt. I went 100 yards, and he had 99 at one point, then lost 2 yards, ended with 97, and he only had 10 touches. I do feel selfishly, and I say selfishly because I've been predicting he gets 100 yards like every game this season, and every game he gets like 10 to 14 carries and falls just short. I'd love to see it. I do think he's quite clearly the most talented back, and I think we can. There was a couple questions asking about kind of how impressive he's been and kind of where he stacks up, and some people trying to compare it to the CJ Travis combo. I think we already did a bit of a breakdown on that after the win over the Cougars in Pullman. But I'm so impressed with him. And you go back and you watch the game highlights each of the last 4 weeks or so, and I can think of very few runs where he doesn't make at least one guy miss. I mean, it's pretty impressive. His ability to change direction. I think his vision is great. I think his footwork and his balance is impressive. I just love the way he runs, and I think he's one of the more talented running backs, in the conference. PFF, I think, has him third nationally in their rushing grades for the whole season in terms of that's just running the football, what they're doing with the ball. His grade was in, I think, the mid 90s for this last week. And again, small sample size. But I mean, so I guess my answer is it seems like when he has the ball, good things happen. So I'd love to see him get the ball more. I also am not expecting to see him carry the ball more than maybe 16, 18 times in a game all season. I think they want to rotate. And I will also say the step back to Noah hasn't been exactly terrible. I think he's run really hard and I've been really impressed with him. And they clearly have roles that they want to use for Jordan and for Sean. Do I think Bucky, if he was a full-time, 3-down back and played 80% of the snaps, could be super explosive and put up video game numbers? Sure. But I don't expect that to happen. So I'm not going to sit here and say they need to do that.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, I think we'd all like to see Bucky Irving be a bell cow back just because it's really fun to watch him play. But there's no real reason to have him there. Noah Whittington is a very solid running back. We saw it yesterday. We've seen it multiple times this season. He's explosive, but he also lowers his shoulder into guys. He could be a number one running back too. And, for a little bit at the start of the season, it was kind of a back and forth of who was going to start. Clearly Bucky has taken the reins on that, and clearly he has showcased, especially the last 2 weeks, that he is just a dude. Again, if you give him one more carry against Stanford, he gets over 100 yards. If you give him one, maybe two more carries against Washington State, he gets over 100 yards. I think in a game like who we were just talking about, Arizona, who's allowing 1 million yards on the ground, those types of games could be where Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington eat, and they showcase why they are 1 and 2, not one and then just the other guy. This is very similar to the CJ and Travis deal that Oregon has dealt with the last couple of years, where you have two very talented running backs and it doesn't matter who gets the carries. I think Bucky and Noah are a little more alike than Travis and CJ. I almost said Savis, a nice combination. I think it's clear that these guys are just too good not to have one guy get like 25 carries and the other guy get like 6 or 7. And their offense doesn't change. Whittington can do everything that Bucky does. I think he's a better pass blocker, at least grading out wise. I think he is, but I think it's fine to have them both have a 50-50 or 55-45% split. Personally, yeah, I'd love to see Bucky run more, just because, man, he's really dang good. And like the question says, Renfrow moves 9 yards a carry. That's really hard to do. That's not happening often, and he's putting a lot of effort into that, and he's just so much more talented than a back I think we've seen in the last couple of years here.
I think we are seeing the bell cow happen. It's just they're splitting the carries up between two guys. Sure. Bucky and Noah are pretty identical in their attempts. Bucky with 48 through 5 games, Whittington with 46 through 5 games. The third leading rusher on the team is Bo Nix. And I don't know if that's by design. Some of it, his 80-yard touchdown was him making a read and then choosing to run the football. It was an option, but it wasn't the exact play call for him to just run the football. Dollars and Jordan James are tied for 4th with 19 carries. I think Oregon's going with this strategy to preserve health, to make sure by the end of the season they have 3 or 4 guys who are full go and aren't dealing with some kind of, I don't want to say major, but some kind of injury that they're having to play through that kind of limits what they've done. How many times in the last 4 years was the concern in November of Verdell? How effective is he going to be because he's playing dinged up? I mean, we saw that with Royce Freeman a little bit towards the end of his career as well. Ty Thompson, Thomas Tyner was another guy that dealt with a lot of injuries. He took some carries. It's knock on wood here. It's the 5th week of the season through. We're through 5 weeks, but I don't feel like Bucky or Noah or Dollars or James are really like flirting with some kind of like limitation injury wise. And if your 2 top guys are, they're obviously not going to be 100%, but if they're near 90% come November, you're playing with house money there. So I like what they're doing. The production still happens. Bucky is, I think, in the top 10 in rushing yards, and then Nix and Whittington are just close. I mean, if you're really splitting hairs, really splitting hairs, and we know Dan Lanning's not a stat guy, so he could care less. But from a touchdown perspective, Bucky and Noah having a combined 2 through 5 games probably isn't the greatest selling point on the recruiting trail, or but look at the production that they're doing on a per carry basis, and that kind of makes up for it. So I'm not worried. I like what they're doing. Keep going.
I think another thing we have to consider here is a bit of the game script and situational stuff.
Right.
You look at I think you just throw the Georgia thing out. That was the first game. They're still trying to figure out rotations. They literally played 5 guys and gave them pretty even snap counts. And that was even more even against Eastern. But the last 3 games against good competition or Power 5 competition, the BYU game and the Stanford game, you were in blowouts there. There's no reason to play Bucky in the second half, really. And he didn't play hardly in the second half of this last game either. The Washington State game, you were behind. And so you were throwing the football a lot in terms of, I think actually Bucky, I'd like to go back and look at the snap count. Jared, can you pull that up on PFF? I know we don't trust PFF snap counts. Can you give me a snap count comp between Bucky and the rest of the backs for the Washington State game? Because
Yes,
I think that might be kind of telling, because that was the one game where it was really competitive in the second half. They had to have offensive efficiency. They couldn't rotate in and kind of start giving some backup guys some more snaps, because part of me does go also, what happens when they get into a game where it is, maybe they're not trailing, but maybe they're only up 3 points or 7 points, and it's a really good, like against UCLA probably, maybe against Arizona, I don't think so, but against UCLA, maybe it's a really close game and they have to kind of play these guys for 4 full quarters. I have a kind of, my expectation will be that they'll probably play Bucky a larger snap count than he is right now. Do you have that yet, Jared?
Yeah, I do. Bucky Irving, according to PFF, which, we'll get to maybe one day, has 39 snaps against Washington State. Noah Whittington had 27, Sean Dollars had 9, and Jordan James had 4.
Okay. So, I mean, you look at that, you're looking at, if you're just,
but that all makes sense. It's the reason why Bucky and Noah only have 2 combined touchdowns is because Jordan James is getting all the goal line carries, or they're just throwing the ball. Like, they're still very situational now. And like you were saying, Erik, with against Washington State, where it's all just pass protection and who's the best receiving running back out of the backfield, like they're gonna go with one dude more likely than not. I mean, Noah got in there in the second half and had an occasional run, but it was all pass heavy. It was all making sure that someone was blocking and someone was getting out into space if they can.
The 39-27 split, though, is closer to a dominant timeshare than what I feel like it's felt like in other games, though. And that was kind of the point I was trying to get to, because that's closer to a 60-40, a 65-35 split, as opposed to a 50-50 between those two. Because as Matt said, I guess if you want to say it's a bell cow thing, it's a bell cow between 2 guys. I do wonder if once you get into a little more competitive games, if this could tilt towards a 65-35, 60-40 in a second half. But we'll see. They're still rotating clearly, and that's kind of belaboring the point. I was just curious on that particular game, because that was the one down that's been really competitive, and they've kind of had to kind of go with their guys for all 4 quarters. All right, third one and the last one before we get to the break, from @Rhino88. We had a lot of questions on this topic, so I wanted to just address this a little bit here. Can we consider Justin Flowe injury prone at this point? And in the second part, and probably won't cut it at Oregon. The first part, I don't know how we handle the concept of injury prone at this point. I always find that to be such a sort of like subjective, sort of like an immaterial term. Like, I don't know what that means. I think sometimes there's really bad luck with injuries. I don't know if I believe in the concept of being injury prone. I believe in like the concept of being prone to do things like makes sense in some instances. Like, I think a quarterback might be turnover prone. He might stare down receivers and throw the ball into positions where they get intercepted more frequently, or running back might be fumble prone, or an offensive, basketball player might be foul prone, or an offensive lineman might be penalty prone because of stylistic things. Injury prone, I don't know if that is a thing I really believe in personally. What I will say is he's dealt with a lot of injuries here, and it's completely derailed his career. And I feel really bad for him. To the probably won't cut it part, I think it remains to be seen. I'm choosing not to be too pessimistic. I will say it's hard to be real optimistic about how this season has played out for him, though, just because he's missed so much time already. Mm-hmm. And we're 5 games in here, and he's already missed 2 games. He only played like, 15, 20 snaps against Washington State, something like that. I mean, so he's basically played in 2.5 games he's played 50% of the snaps or less for sure in every game this season. So it's hard to feel great about it. I don't know if I want to go like big picture and make any declarations. I will say it's just a bummer. It's just a bummer not seeing him contribute, because I do think there's a lot of talent there. But I don't believe in injury. I don't believe people are like injury prone. What I do believe is once somebody's been injured already, those particular injuries maybe are more likely to take place again. Like maybe he's re-injured something. We don't know what the injury is, and I think that's the hard part here. It didn't look like he was in a boot. Like my working theory on Saturday, until someone pointed out that he wasn't in a boot, was like maybe he's kind of re-injured that foot that he broke last year, but he's not in a boot right now. He's not. There was no injury apparatus at all. So
and he was at practice.
Maybe he got concussed.
Maybe he got concussed. I don't know. It's hard to put this all together right now for me. I'm not really ready also to say he won't cut it at Oregon. I just say his career's been absolutely derailed to this point, which is a real bummer.
It is a real bummer. I'm kind of with you on the injury prone. I think it's an easy kind of like escape into why somebody gets injured. There's a myriad of factors that go into why people get injured, but saying that somebody's injury prone just kind of wipes it all over and just says, they're injury prone. But saying he won't cut it here, I just don't get that. Like, we've just seen him in very limited samples, and he hasn't played in 2 years, and he plays just 3 games so far this year and gets very limited snaps against Washington State. There's still the rest of the season left. There's still a chance for him to get 100% healthy and come out and make plays onto the field. He was tied for first in the team tackles before last night's game, or 2 days ago's game. He's a productive guy when he's on the field. He's not great in pass coverage, but I don't think that there's a linebacker who really is great in pass coverage on this team so far. But defensively, it's tough to have even any opinions of him other than the fact that what he was as a high school player, because that's the most amount of time we've seen him play in the last 4 years. So this book is still very much open in my eyes. He just has to get healthy, and that has been the hardest thing since his arrival into Eugene.
I'll address the second part of the question. He's 5th on the team in tackles with only playing 2.5 games, and he averages the most tackles per game at 6.33. There isn't a player with better production on a per snap basis than Justin Flowe on Oregon's roster right now, statistically, from looking at tackles. Fact of the matter is, he's just not healthy. When he is, he makes plays. Him not being able to cut it is wrong. He's very, very good. It's just he can't be available. And I'm going to butcher whoever said it, but the quote is, your best skill set is your availability. And he's just not available. And if he can get there, he'll be one of Oregon's better players.
Your best ability is your availability, Matt. There you go.
Yeah.
No,
I knew I was going to screw it up, but
yeah, you were. Well, you got every word but one. I think it's the thing that's a little frustrating. It's going to get to the second after the break question, because there's 2 players that right now have basically everybody's pissed off about, basically on the message boards and on social, and it's 2 players that were really highly regarded as prep recruits who haven't quote unquote cut it since they've been here, and Justin's because of injury. And the next guy who we're going to get to after the break is because of, I think, very limited snap counts to really make any determinations, but did not look good in Saturday's game. There's a tease. We don't usually do tease on this podcast, but I just did one. I'm proud of myself.
All right, that's going to do it for us for the first half of the show. I got you again, Erik.
Go ahead.
We'll be back after a break real quick. All right, welcome back to the Odds and Audibles podcast. 3 questions in, 2 more to go.
Was teasing it before. A question from @JoeyBonin33. I love that Ty Thompson is getting experience late in the game, but he has seemed to struggle with those opportunities thus far. I would have liked to see Jay Butterfield get at least one series against Stanford. Do you think Butterfield will get an opportunity soon? #Odds and Audibles. I was talking about before the break. Flowe's getting a lot of flack on social media, on our site, Duck Territory, on the message board, because he's not healthy and people are writing him off. And I think that stinks. And then Ty is getting way more flack because he's playing, but when he does play, it doesn't look great. At least the last 2 games. He had some really nice sequences, I think, at times against FCS opponents in his career. Last year against Stony Brook, this year against Eastern. Had some moments where you're like, hey, that looks good. And then when he's played against not even great competition, but a slight uptick against BYU and this week against Stanford, his pass stats are pretty bad. He's throwing like 2 interceptions and I think like 2 completions against those teams. So I get that part. I think it is really important, by the way, that he's getting late game experience because he probably already has more snap counts this year than he did last year. And that was one of the criticisms that we kind of levied against Mario. And it was in part because I didn't put games away, but hey, can we get the backups out there to develop them and see what you got? And that's what's important about these opportunities. And I also think, as I think Jared pushed back a little bit when I was being pretty critical of Ty, and having gone back and watched it, I don't feel any better about how Ty performed. But this is such a small sample size to try to make a determination on what Ty Thompson is. And the one conclusion you can draw is they're starting the right guy. There's no debate. Bo is much better than Ty Thompson. There's no question about it. Anybody that was still in that camp, I don't think there were many because I think Bo has played so well the last 4 weeks. I think anybody who was kind of doubting is kind of like, all right, this guy's at least giving us an opportunity to score a lot of points. He's playing really well. Let's roll with him. But if there were any holdovers, you see why maybe you shouldn't be. But I also still think he's your second best quarterback. It hasn't looked good. The sample size is not massive. We heard during fall, Jay wasn't better, and Jay was actually maybe, I don't want to say significantly worse, but wasn't exactly turning heads, wasn't exactly blowing people out of the water either. So the reason I kind of bring that up is the backup quarterback thing is always so funny because when the starter's struggling, the backup's everybody's favorite player. Now that the starter is doing well and the backup is struggling, it's the third string guy that is everybody's favorite player. It goes down the ladder. It just goes down the ladder. If Jay was to go out there, would Jake Van Dyne suddenly be the next big thing? He's the fourth string guy. And so I'm kind of poking fun, but I just and I do want to get to Joey's question in a moment here, but this just kind of follows the same logic of like, well, the starter's not doing good, the backup must be better. Well, the backup's not doing well, the third string guy must be better. Every indication I have is that Jay is not better than Ty right now, or hasn't been, at least wasn't in fall camp. Maybe things have changed. Maybe we do see Jay play a little bit. And I guess that gets to the question the second part of the question here from Joey, which is, do you think Butterfield will get an opportunity soon? I'm skeptical of that. There's only so many opportunities in a season to get these guys on the field. And, I don't think anybody can really draw too many conclusions about Ty other than he's clearly not better than Bo. But I think you want to give him opportunities. You want to see what he can do. And if Oregon gets ahead against Arizona, against Cal, I think they'll certainly be there against Colorado. You look at the next month here, there could be some opportunities to get significant game time for these guys. Especially, Colorado, that could be really ugly. I think you want to give Ty as much opportunity as possible. And sure, maybe if Ty has a couple good series, as we saw against Eastern, you give Jay some opportunities. But I also think you want to give Ty an opportunity to build his confidence up a little bit and show what he can do. Because I still, you go back, I know the stats weren't good, and I'm not going to try to say Ty played well because he didn't. You saw some of the physical tools with this arm strength, which are just immense. It's just about, can he kind of tie that in with the rest of it, the progression, the accuracy. the decision making. I just think there's so much more to work with there that you have to get through before you say, hey, Jay's actually now backup guy. And I know the competition's ongoing. I just don't think we've gotten to the point of no return where it's Jay over Ty.
I just think this is an interesting conversation that we're having after Oregon drubs Stanford at home. I guess there's probably just not much else to talk about. This is just such a small, minute thing that happened in the game. I think Ty has been, his stats have been bad, and he really hasn't performed well either. I think he's also gotten extremely unlucky in some of the games that he's gone in. Just some very strange plays that have happened to him. Both of his interceptions, one goes right through Dante Thornton's hand. The next one, he gets hit while throwing the ball, which you could kind of value that to his inability to have pocket awareness and to step up. But and then for whatever reason, it just seems that every play that he's in, that just does not go positive. Every play is just a negative gain.
That's the concerning part for the fans, is that they're only looking at the results and going, every time he's out here, things go badly, which is true. It
is true, right? But I just feel like it's unlucky, and who is going out there and getting these reps, because I think the first running back that went out there with him was Noah Whittington in that fourth quarter. And his first play was like a -2 yard, -3 yard run, even though he had been averaging 7 yards a carry in the game. And Oregon as a team was averaging near 10 yards a carry. I'm not trying to make excuses for Ty here. It's clear that Bo's the right guy, like Erik was saying. I just don't think that this should be this big of a deal. I really don't. I don't. The backup quarterback in this stage of the season is pretty negligible. Like, you'd like to get him into the games, you'd like to see where he's at, but a Ty just hasn't done anything to really promote this type of conversation other than be bad. And I guess if we want to talk about him being bad, which we're doing, we can do that. And for the Jay Butterfield thing, it's clear he's clearly third on the depth chart. It's been clear for that for a long time now. Jay isn't a mobile quarterback, which is the whole point of this offense. Will Jay Butterfield be able to run down the field 80 yards for a touchdown? Probably not. Ty Thompson might have a chance, and Ty Thompson can run the RPO and give the ability that he can actually go run it for 8 to 9 yards to get a first down. I don't think Jay has that type of athleticism, and that's probably why he's third on the depth chart in this offense. Will he get an opportunity soon? Probably not. I don't think Ty Thompson will be getting an opportunity for a long time either, because these games usually in conference don't result in a blowout where your backups are in. And they took care of business against BYU and Stanford. So credit to Oregon. Credit to them putting away a game to the point where they can actually go out and put in their backups. But, maybe they do it again against Arizona. But in the future, it doesn't look likely. It's just not going to be a realistic opportunity. I think if Ty gets into the game, I mean, something bad has happened. I just don't think that there's going to be a lot more opportunities this season for either one of those guys to get into the game.
I disagree. I think there'll be opportunities. I think this weekend could be one. But down the road, if this happens again, I mean, I was more upset that they weren't running the normal offense, it felt like, with Ty Thompson in with a majority of the starters than what he was doing. Because he's played as many games as he did last season. He's attempted one less pass through 5 games this year than he did all of last year. His yards are 16 fewer than he did last season. Yes, he's down on touchdowns. Technically, he's a better completion percentage because he's at 50%, 7 of 14 opposed to 7 of 15. But who cares? But this is why you play him right now. Is the last couple of seasons when it was Herbert, we didn't know what Tyler Shuck had because Mario Cristobal, Oregon Ducks, couldn't put teams away, or he just refused to play backups, in particular at quarterback. And then we didn't really know what Ty Thompson was like because Anthony Brown and the Oregon Duck offense, whether it was play or whether it was because the coaching staff chose not to sub guys in, created this issue. And now, people are kind of upset that what they've been clamoring for the last 4 years is happening, and they're giving the backup ample time when it's available. And it's, well, maybe we should see this guy. It's clear Ty's the number 2. And when blowouts arise, they're throwing him out there and they're letting him operate. It doesn't help either guy, I don't think, by playing, 1 or 2 snaps and then rotating, or 1 or 2 drives and then rotating and whatnot for Jay and Ty. I mean, I couldn't believe I was saying it last night or Saturday night because I wanted the game to be over, but throw the ball downfield, run the normal offense with Ty to get more data about what he can or cannot do, and more importantly, help develop him for maybe potentially next year if Bo doesn't come back.
And one last thought, because I don't want to stick 25 minutes on this, but I also think you hear this a lot when a coaching staff makes a change from a starter to a backup in a game. There's almost a point of no return there from a confidence level. You're communicating a sense of frustration, a sense of lack of confidence is, I think, the big one. And the moment you go, hey, Ty, you're not performing well, we're going to Jay, that might be really good for maybe building Jay's confidence, but that could be pretty brutal for Ty. And I think there are probably fans going, well, Ty's not the answer, so make the move. I think that's so premature based upon the amount of time he's played. And as Matt said, this is what these end-of-game opportunities are for, is to get these guys some opportunities to prove themselves, but also to improve and to play some football in actual settings, because they haven't had many. I mean, Ty's got like 29 pass attempts in college. I think it's a little early to write him off and say he stinks, which is why I think making a move to Jay sends kind of a weird message to Ty anyway. I know it's the 2 versus the 3 thing and not the 1 versus the 2, but I do think there's a similar dynamic psychologically to be had there, which I also think is why I don't know if we'll see Jay play very much this year, maybe against Colorado, and it gets really, really ugly, and they've got a whole half perhaps if they really take care of business. But who knows? All right, last one from @SparkOr2. How do we feel about Dan Lanning placing restrictions on player participation in Shout? Does it positively, negatively affect the game, recruiting, etc.? I miss Troy Dye absolutely getting down. #Odds and Audibles. All right, I have, and okay. So I wanted to lay out the entire history of this thing, and actually Matt brought up a valid point before I even jump into this that kind of is just worth noting. Bennett Williams says that there's no actual restriction in place, but the players, based upon the way the game is going, basically were like, we haven't earned the right to take part in Shout. Is that kind of a summation that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, he said that Dan flat out didn't tell them they couldn't do it, but that the players felt like it wasn't up to the standard for them to be dancing on the sideline during the game.
Okay.
Which is code for, hey, if we're not here, you can't do this. And they weren't at that level.
So let me read a bunch of quotes. And I told Jared I was doing this, and Jared was like, really? And I was like, the only reason is because I know most fans don't listen to all the press conferences. They don't read all the transcripts. Those are always available at duckterritory.com or on Matt's YouTube page for the videos. But here's just a rundown of every time he talked about Shout. Okay. After the Eastern Washington win, in his opening statement, he said, what an awesome atmosphere. Our fans make this place so special. You get to experience Shout in the third quarter. I think it was a lot of juice surrounding our team and the way we executed tonight. Okay, so there's a positive Shout reference, okay? After BYU, opening statement. Again, opening statement, he's talking about these things right away, which is, I think, kind of interesting. It's hard to coach at the end of the third quarter during Shout, so I've got to figure that out. I thought we stumbled a bit there in the fourth, okay? He was asked later in that press conference, kind of a follow-up, and he says, well, does anybody remember the next play after Shout? Because remember, in this game, the players had a full-on dance party, and it was a great atmosphere. It was featured on, like, it was posted throughout social media of like how fun Oregon is with the Shout thing. But Dan goes, well, does anybody remember the next play after Shout? We gave up a third down for a first down. So I don't know. I've got to figure that out. We talked through what we were going to see, what we're going to play. We didn't finish on the sack, lost contain of the quarterback. So I've got to do a better job of coaching in that situation. That's apparent, but I hope we can figure out a score margin or a rule that can give you an ability to dance on shout based on what the score is. I love that our players have energy and passion for this game. This game is meant to be fun, and our guys are meant to have fun out there, but we have to be detailed, and we have to finish the next play after shout. Okay, so there's that. So there's that kind of progression of it. And then on September 26th, the presser before Stanford, Dan was asked, hey, have you talked to your players about shout? He's give a very simple answer. We talked to our team about it. I think they have an understanding of our expectations. So there's the entire thing. I don't think, and as Matt says, Bennett said, I don't think there is a you can never dance during shout like referendum in place. I don't think there's like a rule written down in the school, in the players handbook of like, if they even have a handbook. But you know what I mean? I don't think there's some agreement in place here. I think it's like an unspoken like, hey, guys, if we're not taking care of business, don't be dancing. You know what I mean? Like if we're making mistakes and we're not playing up to our standard, which is what this game was, even though the score margin, which, it's interesting. Dan said maybe we need to find a score. I would imagine 4 scores is probably enough, pretty close to at least, to dance. But I think this was more about just the totality of the performance.
I know
you don't care, Jared. Jared, do you even want to talk about this? I know.
Yeah, I'll give my 2 cents. It'll be really short, just like the Justin Flowe thing. I just think this is silly that we're talking about it all together. This is like, shout is obviously an Oregon tradition and it's very important during the games, but it doesn't make a difference to me, to anybody who's listening, to you guys, whether or not the players are dancing on the sideline. It probably takes down a few content pieces for some digital creators on Twitter or Instagram or something like that. But call me an old man. I think that this is completely overblown. We can let Dan run his program the way he would like to run it because it seems to be working.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I got. I think this is very silly. Erik, I'm sorry that you read like 3 or 4 quotes and had very into it, but
I know it wasn't that I was really into it. I wanted to communicate the entire history of it, so those listening who are, I think, coming at this with a kind of I don't want to say just with a lack of facts, have an understanding of what's taken place. It's not that I'm super into it. It's just that I'm in total agreement with you guys. I think this is like a complete non-story, but I think when you lay out what the actual story is and like kind of what's happened, you get a better feel for like, because people these days have this habit of they get mad at things because they think they know what the story is and they don't know what the story is. I think this is one of those things where people are like, the players should be dancing. The players aren't allowed to dance. Dan is an anti-fun coach.
Good.
I don't think. But I don't even think that's true. I don't even think that's the case. It's not like Danny's even said, I want the players to have fun. This is about the game. It's not about having a dance party between the 3rd and the 4th quarter. And if the players are going to, like, if they go out when they host, I guess the rest of the season, they might not have one because they play really good teams at home. You think about it, they play UCLA, they play Stanford, or they play Washington, they play Utah. Hypothetically, they get ahead against, I don't think this will happen, against one of those 3 teams, and they play an awesome game, and they're up 55-7. I bet you the players are going to get an opportunity to dance. I bet you they will. Okay. But if these games are super competitive and they're not playing well and they're not having the focus they need to go into the 4th, they're not going to be dancing. So that to me is where things are at. I just wanted to lay out the whole entire thing of like, this is what's happened. This is the origination of it. So that fans that are frustrated about it, that want to see Troy Dye getting down, or whoever the current Troy Dye person is, aren't going like they're stealing and they're ruining our traditions. It's not really about that. I don't think there's like a rule in place that forbids it. It's just, guys, we got to play up to a standard, and if we aren't, don't dance.
Dance.
All I'll say is when 2015 Oregon-Utah matchup happens and Oregon's losing big in the 3rd quarter and it flips to the 4th and players are dancing, there's going to be fans that are going to be complaining, why are they dancing on the sideline? They shouldn't be doing that. They should be listening to their coaches because they're getting their butts kicked. They're not they can't be doing this.
Right. It's been a while since Oregon has lost at home, so people forget that. There's not a lot of moments where they're down and shout. But you're 100% right, Matt. As soon as that situation arises and there's a couple dudes dancing, people some old fans in the crowd are going to get real mad that they're dancing while down 7 points.
Yep. It's a non-story in my eyes. I think Jared said it too. Erik is being the journalist of the three, trying to present all the facts so that people are understanding of what's happening. So kudos to you, sir, of bringing forth the information.
Well, a lot of people, it's mostly because I just see so much unnecessary outrage, and it just bothers me. I just want to
I get it.
I know we have a decent audience here, and I hope some fans that maybe are like, can come away being like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not that big of a deal.
And look, it's Monday morning. Dan will speak Monday night. I guarantee you it's probably not going to be from the three of us, but
I haven't asked a question about it.
But someone will ask.
Question.
Yeah, someone will ask about it, and it will get brought up again, and we will relay that information. I guarantee you it will get brought up. But we'll have to save that answer for a future podcast. That's going to do it for us here on the Odds and Audibles podcast. Thank you for submitting your questions. We'll be back tomorrow breaking down what we learned from Dan's press conference late Monday night. But until then, you've been listening to the Odds and Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.